It'll be fun. Bearkin keeping us safe from tiny predators. Hey everyone, I'm Kit. Today, Turtle and I are going out on our first trip together since May. We're going to do just an overnight in the Terrill Deam wilderness. Couldn't tell, we're enjoying that quite a lot. This time, due to some questionable weather forecasts and turtles still rebuilding up their stamina, we're heading just a little ways down Terrill Ridge. We're going to check out 2 potential campsites and see how good we feel about each one with the chance of some thunderstorms. And then we'll pitch for the night and enjoy a rainy but cozy camp before heading back out tomorrow morning. I've been a little nervous about the weather, but Turtle's been good about talking me down about being reasonable, and I am looking forward to hanging out nice and warm and cozy under a tarp, spinning lots of yarn with my spindle, and just enjoying time with my sibling in the woods. Right, we are at the trailhead. It is hot and humid, but not yet rainy or stormy. Very still air at the moment. So we just need to get our shoes switched over and get our packs on and prepare for a long and arduous hike of a quarter to a half a mile, depending on which site we pick. So I've been teasing about how strenuous this chunk is, but to be very minorly fair to us, this is the chunk of Terrill Ridge Road with the most elevation change. Will be the only part of Terrill we would possibly cover today. So this is the designated campsite 1. It's about a quarter mile away from the trailhead, right at the intersection of Terrill Ridge and Sycamore. And it's got a nice little decently spaced tree spot for a hammock. A couple tent pad options for Turtle, but we're not feeling completely enchanted by this one, huh? Okay. Most of the point of this trip is about being at camp after all, so we can afford to be a little bit picky and even backtrack here if we decide this would be better after all, because of the very short distances and long timeline we've given ourselves today. And this was actually what I was thinking about pulling back to on my last trip. Yeah. I just, with my battery situation and my mood, and decided no, I'm just... Yeah, totally. If my charging cord had been in the car, I might have backtracked to here, but it was not, and I was done, so... Just right up here. Right on the intersection. Way more spacious. All right, friends, it is just after 1 p.m. and we have officially decided our undesignated site I had in mind is where we're staying for the night. This nice little pine stand is just at the intersection of Terrill Ridge and the Axum Trail. And it is spacious enough that we could bring Creature and friends here sometime in the future. But for right now, it just gives both of us lots of site selection. So we are cooling off and figuring out where we're setting up shelter for whenever the rains do break. And then it's time to just have fun hanging out at camp. we've got all the essential shelter pitched up right now. We've had some tiny spits of rain, but nothing serious, just sudden shower bursts and then they clear. Turtle is having fun playing around with the spare tarp that I hauled in to create more dry hangout space and clothesline space. For right now, I'm just trying to cool down before I tootle around a little more and get things set up just the way I want them. So when we'd camped together last year in May, Turtle had really enjoyed me using my giant square tarp to kind of partially shelter their tent. So we had a kind of shared vestibule situation. So since I switched to the smaller hex quest tarp, that's not as easy to do without crowding really, really close. So their goal right now is to use our spare 9x7 Cabela's tarp that I bought as a sort of bridge to create an extended rain shelter zone. Alright, I think we're done tweaking the campsite for a bit. I got up and got all of my belongings better distributed under cover. And Turtle is done tweaking tarps for now and resting themselves. So it's time for me to stop resting and start spinning. It's still the Tour de Fleece event going on, and today is actually a challenge day. So my challenge is to get as much done in the woods as I can. I really like being close enough that we can pass things back and forth. You were just handing me snacks and stuff.
Yeah, it's real nice.
I like that you thought about trying to be this close. How were you phrasing it earlier?
Sharing a common airspace.
Well, also just as opposed to we're camping in the same area.
Oh, right. Making a camp together instead of just camping in the same campsite.
Yeah, it definitely feels like that.
It kind of feels like sharing a room.
Yeah, it feels a little
but
more
not
like sharing a room.
A bed, which is what sharing a tent kind of feels like.
Sharing a tent definitely feels like sharing a bed. We have spun and lounged and talked and read enough for now. It is 5:45 maybe. Time to make dinner. It's hot and still enough that we're both aiming for the shirtless life right now. But
at least we're not broiling anymore.
We're not broiling, and it's nice and still and quiet. And still no really heavy rain, but that's definitely predicted for later tonight.
All right. Let's cook ourselves some meals.
You packed just the bag meals, didn't you?
Yes, I did. I was like, oh, we're doing the route that we're not going to be able to collect water, but we're just crossing along the way. Well, I don't want to do dishes again. More than just your basic, gotta clean off this board.
I was trying to use up meals that will require dishes, so. Well, that's okay.
This was kind of a last minute plan for me, and I had those two stashed as just in case.
Turtle's having the beef lasagna mountain house. I have. First time I'm trying these freeze-dried instant noodles with an herby cheese sauce. Just a little fire. I don't know that one's gonna have good. Oh, there was a snail! There was a snake hiding under it. He's alive because he's pulling in and oh no.
We'll not really put that back in the same place before the fire.
Terrill is, as usual, cooking on their alcohol stove, which I have not yet gotten successful footage of the process. Yeah, this is the downside of your quiet, efficient little guy. My meal is rehydrating already. You are still trying to get your stove to turn over.
It hasn't yet ballooned, is the term used among alcohol stove people for when the fuel starts to vaporize, the vapor lights.
Yeah.
It doesn't burn real hot until that happens.
Yeah.
So there's a lot more waiting for alcohol stoves.
But
It's quiet.
it's,
It's to sit and contemplate life for a bit.
yeah.
Instead of having a small jet engine take off your Hey, different priorities.
And it's not like we don't have plenty of time. How's your little loungy chair guy treating you, by the way? How do you feel about it?
Pretty good. Requires a little bit of arranging to make sure it's at good angles. But it's just a nice surface to lean back into.
Supposed to be tossing in my herbs and cheese and olive oil and stirring, but I'm not quite sure how that's going to work out with this volume. We'll see. My meal is rehydrated and mixed up, and I'm about to eat. And Terrill is just pouring off their water to start rehydrating. I solved my volume problems by switching vessels. It turns out these heavy-duty, smelly-proof bags only last me as food trash bags for half a dozen trips, maybe, before they start developing little holes. So I had packed a brand new one to start using this trip, but since I had a brand new clean one, I just dumped all of the noodles in, and then it was much easier to stir because there was no way I was stirring this volume inside my pot. We're gonna have to rethink this recipe if I'm gonna be redoing it in the future. But at least I'm hungry today. Review on the noodle dish. It's very nice to have actual noodle texture in one of my homemade dishes. So that's a nice novelty. Flavor balance is okay. I could tweak the herbs a little, but it's a nice thing about DIY. I might throw in a second olive oil packet for this volume, but I also don't know if I want to do this volume again because that could be tricky. Unfortunately, it is also the kind of thing that will get very samey very fast, so I might end up getting creative with a couple of the little extras in the pack just to like balance it out and try to get through it. So I've heard some questioning grumbles, but let's hear the review.
It might not be quite done yet because it's still a little soupy. I mean, maybe it was supposed to be about this texture, but I was expecting something a little bit thicker. But I think, really, it's just kind of bold to call this lasagna.
Yeah, that
It's
tracks.
A noodle dish with sauce.
Well,
Just little bits of pasta.
I hope it's tasty at least.
Try not to burn my tongue. We'll find out. Yeah, the
Good.
flavor's good.
Good.
It's Mountain House. They do know how to do that.
Just texture. Not lasagna. Maybe a little too soupy.
It's definitely inspired by lasagna.
Okay. So it is still 10 minutes till 7 p.m., but I am already cleaned up, changed into sleep clothes, and laying in the hammock. Mostly because the woods are just muggy and buggy. And at least in my hammock, I can fully physically relax and have bug netting. I am not regretting doing this at all, because I wanted to, finish out the rest of the days of my trip that I took before this one, and I really wanted to get one more trip with Terrill in this season, because as soon as they go back to work, they'll be very busy, and within too short of a span of time, they'll be in their busiest season and probably unable to do anything at all. So, I wanted to get at least one more trip in this year. But this is definitely a chill in your shelters in the woods, and that's what you enjoy kind of trip. So, I feel like I probably ought to be spinning with my evening chill on, but instead I am laying here, listening a little bit ominously to that thunder developing. It'll be fine. Here comes the rain. So it's definitely coming down heavy now. Not even sure how well you can hear me at the moment, but it's staying very nice and dry, especially under our bridge cart breezeway situation going on here. I've got everything I need in my ridgeline organizer. Now just however many hours we sit out the rain and then the dark. I spoke too soon. Literally as I was recording that, we discovered the bridge tarp was collecting water and one of the back corners collapsed. So now Terrill is up and figuring out what they want to do. Yeah. Oh, right. Breezeway has been resecured. Terrill is the tarp hero of the day. I dedicated my assistants and my towel because they were insisting they were already wet. So I'm going to insist it's my turn to fix things if it collapses again, I guess. But yeah, with my hammock system, the only things I worry about in heavy rain are water running down my lines and starting to soak the ends of my hammock, because that starts running down into the body to the low point at me. Similarly with if I mess up with my lines, I can get water running under the tarp, on the tarp lines.
Right, yeah. And it's not enough that it's not collecting water now that we fixed that way.
Yeah. And then I worry about like splashback or ground running, soaking things that aren't in the hammock system like I pack. But otherwise, like, rain isn't a huge deal. You just have to know how to set your stuff up.
Right. Yeah, there's an issue when it gets bad enough water on the ground especially.
Yeah.
There's only so far the hydrostatic load of the 10-foot tank.
Yeah.
And then you're just on the ground surrounded by that wet.
Yeah.
But like...
Yeah.
I'm going to be a lot more blasé about weather camping in high summer, like now,
Oh, yeah.
than I will be in any other time of
Yeah.
You know what's funny?
What?
If we were at home during this storm, I would be doing this on couch.
Yeah. Yeah.
Instead I'm doing it in the woods.
Might as well get some spinning done, I guess. see y'all in the night. Well, bearkin keeping us safe from tiny predators. Anyway, it's time for coffee. Or at least while there's a break in the rain. I was getting so enthusiastic about coffee, but water got into the bear can. How are you doing this morning?
Well, I didn't get actually rained on in my tent, so that is the thing.
We both stayed remarkably dry in our shelters, and most of my gear was dry. And it turns out that the inner moisture layer on my coffee was dry. So, no hot breakfast for me, and we're going to see how a honey stick and coffee does, but things are looking up. Especially since it's not actively raining at the moment, so we might be able to hike out without getting soaked.
Yeah, just sort of barely dripping.
So, while I wait for my coffee to cool enough to drink, I want to talk a little bit about why it felt worth it to me to camp out in this when I literally canceled the latter half of my previous trip because of rain. And there's a couple things that are different. One of the biggest ones is that I'm not alone. There's somebody else with me. We've got a buddy system, and also somebody to keep me company, hanging out in the long rain. Number two, we are in a much, much better position for getting out over extremely wet, slippery terrain or active downpour, because we're literally half a mile from the car down the widest actual road of a trail, rather than last time when I would have been following deer trails and bushwhacking around floodwaters that might have risen. Other important point, I haven't looked up the actual rainfall records, but at one point in the night they'd been upping their projected total to as high as 4 inches. We definitely got close to 2. And that feels much better sitting here at the upper point of one of the lower ridges than it would have down by the lakeshore. And finally, in a disaster struck through weather scenario, both of those factors, company and position, would make it a lot easier for us to get help. Either for one of us to get out, for both of us to get out with our persons, if not our gear, or for, worst case scenario, rescue teams to get into us. So, I know that's a lot of overthinking and hyperbole for just a heavy downpour and a half-mile hike, but I really prefer to be prepared, and I think being so taken by surprise on that Bloodroot trip has really changed the way that I think about double checking weather forecasts and planning, because I never want to feel like I am stuck 5 miles away from the car in a potential tornado again, if it's at all controllable for those factors. I realized I never to this point talked about the logistics of another new thing we were doing on this trip, which is, amusingly enough, given the weather conditions, dry camping. Neither of the sites we had planned had easy water access for filtering. Part of that was because of the weather forecast. We decided to go for higher up sites with zero risk of flooding. I really wanted to make sure we carried in absolutely enough water for everything we needed. Although there were a couple backup water bottles in the back of my car, like always. If it was absolutely necessary, we could have gone back for some. It was not necessary because in addition to my normal 2 1-liter bottles, and then the backup mini Nalgene that's half a liter that I often fill a little if I'm worried about a long water carry. And Terrill's 1 liter and I believe 750 ml drinking bottles that they normally carry. Terrill had their gallon of stainless steel carriers, which is almost 4 liters. And I brought my Canuck Vecto bag that came with my Sawyer kit, full of sink water from home, straight from the faucet, freshly cleaned bag, as backup water. And it was a lot easier to carry that much water weight than I thought. My total pack weight, once I filled it up, was actually right at my standard 32 to 33 pounds I've been getting lately. Somehow, the way I juggle things around keeps evening out to about that amount. But it's nice to know if it's necessary for long carries or dry camps in the future, that much water weight is not a huge impediment, and this is easy to fit into my current pack structure. Everything is going to be pretty wet packing back in, but one of the other things I learned from previous rainy trips is that I do have extra dry clothes ready and waiting for when we get to the car. For measuring our dry camping success, I'm not totally sure where Terrill's water bottles have shaken out to, but I was able to get all the way through last night, the hike out, all meals last night, incidental drinking water at camp, and making coffee this morning on just the 2.5 liters that I carried in my normal bottles. So that's a good barometer for me for being not super careful with water about how much I would need, albeit on a day where we did not have strenuous hike, but we had a lot of heat. Temperature review according to the thermodrop. Right now it thinks it's 78. The high it picked up yesterday was 87, and the low overnight was the expected 72. That really tracks with my perception of temperatures. It's also interesting to note my low on my last trip was 72, and I still ended up getting chilled enough that I wanted to pull out the top coat. But with this trip, I put my underquilt protector on the underquilt due to the expected amount of rain, and I didn't need the top quilt at any point. I just like tracking the temperature so I know how my gear's performing based on conditions so that I can make better plans the next time. Ready to go now?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. We made it. Yet again. Still the only car here. Okay, so back at the car. How do we feel about this trip? At the car wrap.
I feel good about this trip.
Yeah.
I'm glad it wasn't just an overnight and not a multi-day.
I'm glad it was just an overnight.
Yeah, I wasn't prepared for a multi-day.
I wasn't either.
This was a different kind of challenge than I expected.
Yeah, how so?
I mean, I should have expected. I'd been talking about expecting, but my endurance is not where I want it to be.
Yeah, but that'll get better with time.
Yeah.
Regardless, are there any fun things you think you learned from this trip? Takeaway kind of things?
Got some practice with adjusting tarps as a storm is coming in.
You for sure did that. I didn't get a ton of footage of that, but I did get a little, I think.
Just the rain started coming down heavier and suddenly all the flaws became obvious.
That is how tarps tend to work, yeah. I feel like I learned a lot about my tolerances for comfort and weather, and kind of re-inscribed it in my brain how cozy it is to be in the hammock during rain, and really cemented for my brain how I'm good at hanging to avoid rain problems, because this was an absolute deluge, and I hear so many horror stories from newer hammock campers getting water running down their suspension or various other kinds of problems getting wet in the rain, and I have never gotten terribly wet in the rain, but this was the driest I've ever been and the heaviest weather I've ever been. Yeah, so I'm pretty impressed with my skills there, and I think that will help me have more confidence in the future.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it is time to drive home because I am desperate for a shower. And then we'll figure out post-hike meal.
Yeah.
As well.
Yeah.